I'm starting a new series today about HR-1, the one big beautiful bill racing through Congress. A 1,000-page behemoth that promises tax cuts, but could change life for West Texas families here in Texas 11 in ways nobody's talking about. So, we're going to talk about it. Now, I say here in Texas 11 because I'm using the 11th Congressional District of Texas as an example, a stand-in for the rest of the country. It's mostly rural, mildly urban, and very much deep red Trump country. Let's see how this bill actually affects real Americans, like those in Texas 11. They're calling it the One Big Beautiful Bill. It's big anyway. That's their slogan. It's even on some of their campaign signs. A neat, shiny package, easy to sell in a 30-second spot on local TV. But peel back that slick label and what do you find? A mountain of paper, 1,000 pages long. That's more than the entire Bible front to back by a wide margin. Stacked high on the desks in Congress, it towers like a silent monument to how complicated and how consequential this thing really is. It bulldozed its way through the House of Representatives. Nearly every Republican signed on. It squeaked through the Senate thanks to J.D. Vance and Lisa Murkowski. The headlines say it's a giant tax cut for hardworking Americans, for families right here in Texas 11. They roll it out at rallies with big flags and even bigger smiles. And look, who doesn't want a tax cut? If you're like most folks around here, trying to keep up with gas prices, insurance premiums, groceries that somehow double every time you go to the store, a tax cut sounds like a blessing. But here's the real question. What's actually inside this monster? Because 1,000 pages doesn't just hand out little refunds. It remakes huge swaths of how this country runs. Who gets funded? What gets cut? Who gets a leg up and who gets left behind? So before we celebrate, maybe we ought to slow down and ask, what's really going to change in our daily lives? What's it going to cost us? Not just on paper, but in our schools, our hospitals, our paychecks, our kids' futures. That's what we're going to dig into. Because if it's really so big and beautiful, it ought to be able to stand up to a little sunlight. Let's start with the big strokes. Because if you want to understand what this 1,000-page beast is actually doing, you've got to look at the main pillars, the giant beams holding it up. First, the extension of the Trump-era tax cuts. That's at the top of the list. This bill locks in the tax cuts that were first passed under Trump 1 back in 2017. Those cuts were always meant to be temporary, set to phase out over the next few years for individuals, while most of the corporate cuts were permanent. Well, this bill makes sure that personal tax cuts keep on rolling. Lower rates on your paychecks, bigger standard deductions. That means more take-home pay for a lot of people, at least on paper. But it's also a huge windfall for corporations and wealthy investors, because it preserves lower rates on big business profits and on certain kinds of income that mostly benefit folks at the very top. So yes, if you're a family here in Texas 11 making $50,000 or $60,000 a year, you'll probably keep a few hundred more dollars. But if you're a shareholder with a giant portfolio or a CEO pulling in 7 or 8 figures, you're saving millions. Second, a colossal new deficit. Next, and this is where the wheels start to wobble, this bill blows a hole in the federal budget. We're talking about adding roughly $2.4 trillion to the deficit over the next 10 years. That's money the government doesn't have, which means it'll borrow. Just pile it on top of the national debt. Now, politicians try to hand-wave this away. They'll say, oh, economic growth will pay for it, like it did in the 80s. But even their own budget office doesn't buy that. When independent experts ran the numbers, they still landed at trillions of new debt. Because of PAYGO, we're looking at automatic cuts. And here's where it even gets more serious. Under existing law, something called PAYGO, short for pay as you go, if Congress passes a bill that increases the deficit, It automatically triggers spending cuts to offset the difference. If lawmakers don't step in and override the rule, it means deep cuts down the road. And you can count on the Republicans trying to avoid direct responsibility for these cuts. Cuts to Medicare reimbursements, which hit hospitals and seniors. Cuts to farm supports, which matter to ranchers and growers all across Texas. Cuts to education grants, workforce training, even programs that fix roads and bridges in rural counties. It's like putting the government on autopilot toward a chainsaw. Third, Medicaid and SNAP are in the crosshairs. Then there's health care and food aid. This bill doesn't directly slash Medicaid or SNAP, the Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program, right here in the text. But by exploding the deficit and setting up these pay-go cuts, it basically loads the gun. It means that when lawmakers look for places to tighten the belt later on, Medicaid and SNAP are right at the top of the list. We've seen it before. States respond by making it harder to qualify, more paperwork, stricter income checks, longer wait times. So fewer families get covered. Fewer kids get health screenings. Less help at the grocery store at a time when eggs are pushing $5 a dozen. And don't forget, Abbott just gave up $500 million in federal assistance for food aid to Texas. Fourth, a quiet rewrite of how agencies keep big corporations in check. There's another piece that isn't getting nearly enough attention. This bill slips in changes to administrative law. Basically, how much power federal agencies have to regulate big corporations. It makes it harder for agencies like the EPA, OSHA, and the FDA to write rules and enforce standards. So it becomes tougher to hold polluters accountable or crack down on unsafe working conditions, like out there in the oil fields, or to pull tainted food off store shelves before it hurts someone. It's a subtle shift, buried in legal language. But over time, it means more decisions get punted to the courts, where companies can tie things up for years, and less day-to-day power for experts to protect the public. Fifth, cuts to research in the industries of tomorrow. And finally, this bill puts the brakes on federal investment in research and development. To some in Congress, R&D is just government waste. But that money funds everything from next-gen manufacturing techniques to new energy solutions and advanced medical research. It's how we got breakthroughs like MRI machines, the internet, and some of the cancer drugs saving lives right now. It's how we keep American industries on the cutting edge. So we're not buying all our tech and machinery from overseas 20 years from now. Cutting this kind of spending might save a few bucks in the short term and, give the billionaires a bigger tax cut. But it's like selling off your tractor because you don't want to pay for the fuel, then standing around wondering why the crops won't come in. So those are the main pillars of this one big beautiful bill. A big shiny extension of tax cuts that largely favor corporations and the wealthy. A $2.4 trillion hole in the budget that sets up automatic cuts to things regular folks count on. A squeeze on Medicaid and SNAP just waiting down the road. Quiet tweaks that handcuff agencies trying to keep big companies honest. And a retreat from investing in the future of American jobs and technology. In other words, it's big all right. But whether it's beautiful for everyday Texans, well, that's something we're going to keep exploring. Now look, in fairness, we've got to be honest about this. Yes, the bill does lower taxes for a lot of people. Plenty of middle-class families will see a bit more in their paychecks. If you're earning $50,000 or $60,000 a year, you might notice an extra $40, maybe $50 every couple of weeks. And that's not nothing. And especially right now, with groceries bills that make you wince every time you're at the checkout, and insurance premiums creeping up year after year. A few $100s a month can help keep the lights on, fix a leaky roof, or get new tires without putting it on the credit card. That's real. And it's why this kind of bill is so easy to sell. Who wouldn't cheer for a little breathing room? Especially in the short run. Because that's what this mostly is. Relief right now in the moment. Lower withholding on your paycheck. More take-home pay. But, and this is where it gets tricky, tax cuts don't happen in a vacuum. The government doesn't just close up shop. We still expect the roads to get paved, the local clinics to stay open, the teachers to show up, firefighters to answer the call. We still count on Social Security checks going out to our parents and grandparents every month. We still want Medicare to pick up the tab for major surgeries and prescriptions. So if taxes go down, but we keep spending on all those things, which we do, someone has to pick up the tab. And that's the bigger question we're going to spend the next few episodes digging into. Who really pays for this? Who foots the bill when Uncle Sam slashes taxes but still needs to keep all the gears of daily American life turning? Is it our kids? Our grandkids? Who inherit a mountain of debt that makes it harder for them to afford college loans or buy a house? Is it working families who get squeezed later when the inevitable spending cuts come? Or is it seniors on Medicare, farmers relying on subsidies, veterans clinics, rural hospitals, the usual suspects when budgets tighten? And most importantly, who actually benefits the most? Because if you listen at all the rallies, it sounds simple. They'll tell you it's the little guy. It's small business, working moms and dads, salt-of-the-earth people just trying to get by. But history, and frankly math, say it's rarely that simple. Usually the biggest slices of the pie go to people who already have more than enough pie to begin with. So that's where we're headed. Over the next few episodes, we'll look closely at the winners, and we'll look at who might lose out. And we'll try to answer a question nobody on the campaign trail ever seems to. Is this really big and beautiful for all of us, or just a lucky few? So that's what we've got laid out at the table right now. A 1,000-page monster bill, big enough to tilt the entire playing field of our economy. Big enough to change how money flows in and out of our paychecks, our schools, our clinics, and even our courts. On the surface, it promises lower taxes today, a little extra in your pocket right now, and a political ribbon to cut for the folks in Washington. But underneath, it comes with bigger deficits tomorrow, with automatic spending cuts lurking in the shadows, ready to spring up when the budget math doesn't add up, just so Congress can say, it wasn't our fault, we didn't do that. Cuts that don't just trim the fat, but carve into the muscle. Medicare, farm support, rural development grants, education programs, all the things communities like ours count on. And it quietly rewrites the rules so courts and regulators can't keep big corporations on as tight a leash. Fewer guardrails on pollution, on food safety, on worker protections. More power concentrated at the top. Less say for everyday people who have to live with the consequences. So that's the lay of the land. But it's really just the start. Because over the next few episodes, we're going to break this down piece by piece. We'll track where the money is actually going. Who gets tax cuts in real dollar terms? Is it your cousin running a plumbing business in Abilene? Or is it mostly flowing to hedge funds on Wall Street? We'll look at who gets the biggest slices. Which industries, which income brackets, which kind of political donors walk away smiling the widest. And we'll dig into what it all means for folks right here in our community. Will local hospitals face reimbursement cuts that make it harder to keep an ER open? Will local schools struggle even more to hire and keep good teachers? Will small-town Main Street get a boost or find themselves competing with big-box giants, paying even less in taxes than before? Because these aren't just national headlines. They're the reason a kid here might wait 6 months for a speech therapist, or why a volunteer fire department struggles to afford new hoses, or why your property taxes keep going up to cover what the state and feds stop paying for. So stick with me, because over the next few episodes, we're going to pull this thing apart. Follow the money, follow the power, and shine a light on who stands to gain the most. Because when they stand on stage and call it big and beautiful, you've always got to ask, big and beautiful for who? Are we, the families, workers, and small businesses here in Texas 11, really part of that picture? That's what we're here to find out.